School board meeting to order for the Fargo Board of Education, December 11th, 2018. I'd like to welcome all of you here tonight and welcome Rebecca on the telephone. With that, we will move to the approval of the agenda. Jim.
I move adoption of the agenda with the addition of the HR addendum that was at our workstations.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, motion and second. All approved, signify by saying yes.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And we have no one signed up tonight to speak, so we will move right into item number 3, some of our success stories. And we will start with the positive behavior interventionists, technicians, Patty, Kim, and Jen.
Good evening. Thank you so much again for allowing us to share with you some of our successes. I love standing up here for the good stories. So I, again, will not be talking a whole lot. I'm going to turn it over to the leadership team who has their hands on with that, and that's Jen Saar and Kim Myers for this short presentation about our positive behavior program.
The Positive Behavior Program Overview. This program was really created for students whose behavior impedes the learning of self and or others who have not been identified as having a behavioral disability. It was designed to provide direct intervention, instruction, and support to address a child's lagging skills and unsolved problems, where lagging skills are really when the demands of the environment exceed the child's capacity to respond adaptively, and unsolved problems really relate to the specific expectations a child is having difficulty meeting.
Generally speaking, when we're talking about intervening with our students in the positive behavior program, we're using applied behavioral analysis, and that is comprised of 4 components, which you can see, the first one being reinforcement. Reinforcement is just really that, trying to reinforce skills. We know that any behavior that's reinforced will increase, and so one of the keys is really tapping into ensuring that we're reinforcing the behavior we want to increase and not accidentally or inadvertently reinforcing a behavior that we are intending to decrease. The next component is chaining. And that is essentially taking a skill or what we hope to see from a child and breaking it down into smaller components or tasks. And then starting with teaching at that very lowest skill, kind of the simplest skill, right? So we're gathering those initial successes. And then with reinforcement, also being able to continue to move on to those more complex portions of what we're hoping to see until ultimately we can get that entire sequence chained together. And we have the behavior that we're looking for. The third piece is prompting, and it's something that probably all of us as adults are very familiar with, and it is exactly what it says to be. It is prompting, so it might be verbal, and in terms of a request or a phrase or a statement that's used to prompt a child for a particular behavior, or it could also be nonverbal, so it might be something that the adult uses, an action that they use, or it could be a symbol on the student's desk or a picture in the classroom, but prompts the child to be thinking about the skills that they've been learning so that they can apply it in the appropriate situation. And then the last piece is shaping in terms of applied behavior analysis, and that is essentially reinforcing the best approximations of the behavior we want to see. So again, getting closer and closer so that each time that those best approximations get closer to the ultimate behavior. So those are the four components of applied behavioral analysis, and that's what we're using in the program primarily. And then the last piece is, who is providing these opportunities? And we're in our second year of the positive behavior program, which includes positive behavior interventionists and positive behavior technicians. And we'll go into a little bit more about what those positions look like and where they are. But as well, we can't lose sight of the classroom teacher. Ultimately, we want our students to be back in our classroom so that they're receiving their instruction with their peers. So it takes a lot of communication with those interventionists, technicians, and the classroom teacher, as well as those building teams. Everybody who's part of that building staff is part of that program.
So, as Jen mentioned, we'll talk a little bit more about the positive behavior program positions. The first position that we're going to talk about is positive behavior interventionist, or a PBI. Their role is to develop, implement, and monitor student behavior plans. They work in conjunction with the MTSS team and BCBA, and they hold a bachelor's degree or higher in a field of human services. Some examples might be social services, education, psychology, etc.
And then that other position is the positive behavior technician. And so that person falls underneath our classified staff, and they assist the PBI with the implementation of the plan that's been written, as well as monitoring that plan and watching the data to ensure that the students' behavior that we want to increase is increasing, and those that we're looking to decrease are also decreasing. Positive behavior technicians, we look for them out of a variety of fields, but they can come to us as well with high school diplomas or GEDs.
So a little bit about the program. Looking back, we have some data from 2017, 2018, and then current data from 2018, 2019. And this data is as of December 5th, 2018. So how many schools have this program? Well, in 2017, 2018, there were 10 schools, and there are also continued to be 10 schools at this point where we have data through December 5th. How many PBI positions? In 2017, 2018, there were 6. And then it expanded to 9 in 2018, 2019. And as far as PBTs, or the positive behavior technician positions, in 2017, 2018, there were 7. And now that has increased to 11 in 2018, 2019.
So with some of the expansion from 17-18 to the current year and the number of people we have in our schools supporting our kids, you can see that our total number from last year was 151 students who were touched by the program, and already this year we've been able to work with 176 kids in the program. So as we continue, we know by the end of this year that number will be likely will be greater, as well as kids continue to move in and out of the program. I think most impactful is that last line on the screen, and the number of our kids who have been part of the program who are being dismissed back to Tier 1, so being dismissed back into the regular classroom with very little support. Maybe some check-ins, or maybe check-ins aren't even required any longer. Last year, by the end of the school year, we had 3 students, but already this year, we've had 27 kids who have been part of the program who are now successful with their behavior back in the classroom. And so I think it's important to note that those 27 kids, they really do come out of that 151 from last year, right? They've continued in the program, had that follow through over the summer back into the new year, and have been able to be successful and be dismissed back to Tier 1. So with that information, I think we can only expect that as we continue through this year, that number will continue to climb as well. And it's just evidence of the hard work that's happening by those positions and those schools working with our students. And the last piece that we have is just a short video that we'd like to share with you. We can share with you the numbers and our observation as part of being the leadership team, but I think ultimately the proof is in the pudding, right? And the kids who are being impacted by the program, as well as the teachers and the other staff members. So just hope you enjoy the results of these 2 years of work. You can see a lot of our students also are finding the benefit in the program and the relationships that they're building with the positive behavior interventionists and technicians. And with that, if you have questions, we'd be happy to answer them, but we also know that your agenda is lengthy tonight too.
So I have a question. Why is there only, you had 10 schools last year and 10 schools this year. Why only 10? I mean,
Well-
why is there not more than 10? If it's such a successful program, then why is there 10 schools offering it?
The first thing that comes to my mind is funding.
Thank you.
And maybe I'll just piggyback off of that. There is a rubric that we had worked on developing really to identify where in the building are we able to use the dollars that are available to best meet the majority of the needs. And so that is something that we looked at last year and will continue to evaluate as we plan moving forward as well.
Robin?
So this makes me think of a targeted counseling type program. Are there caseloads? Are they within each school? Are they pull out from the classes? Help me understand the delivery method.
What I would say about that, just to correct a little bit, is it's not counseling, it's
Okay.
direct instruction in behavior regulation, social emotional regulation. But you are right in equating it to the fact that there are caseloads. And we would say that some of them feel that they do have some pretty hefty caseloads. We will admit that we need to put in some better data collection to know exactly to see where the move in and move out and how the students fluctuate, to also help us determine the increase in needs. I was going to add on to the end of the other question that I think there's not one elementary principal who would want to say no to this. They all want it, so they're asking for it.
Follow up, Robin.
Yep. So are you housed in or in these 10 schools? Do you have a separate office space, or help me understand?
Yeah, so in all of the buildings that have the program, all but one, essentially, they have both a PBI and a PBT. We have one building this year that has just recently hired a second technician, so they're a team of 3. But these folks do have their own space, and answering part of your initial question as well, Robin, for some of these kids, it does require pulling out so that there's specific skill instruction, like when Kim talked about lagging skills, they're working specifically with providing instruction to teach them those skills and give them an opportunity and a place to practice those skills in a more controlled environment. And then the real goal of the technician is to work with that child as they're heading back into the classroom to help them be able to be successful utilizing those skills in the classroom as well, giving them those cues, that prompting, and those kinds of things related to behavior analysis to help that carry over the generalization of the skill that they've been working on.
Thank you.
Jennifer?
Do we at FPS offer some sort of specialized training for the PBTs? Or what is their background in terms of?
So when this was developed, Jennifer, we really looked, so you saw the board certified behavior analyst leads the charge on applied behavior analysis, because this is the scientific version of working with behaviors. We mimicked what in that field of ABA, what you would need to be in order to be a registered behavior technician. So there's a whole professional other side of this, non-educational side, but professional side. So they go through the same training that others would have to get to the point and up to taking a national exam. We have not entered into registering our positive behavior technicians yet. It requires a substantial amount of supervision to do that from a BCBA. So.
Go ahead.
So as a follow-up to that, is this something that our current counselors could be also cross-trained in?
Yes, for the training part. I mean, individuals can be trained to do it. I think what we're looking at is the ability to slot the time. So just like our teachers could do this. I mean, if you saw those, you're the best teacher, which I think is so great that the kids are considering these people one of their teachers. It's not that individuals, it's not rocket science. However, you need to be able to have that direct time in small group instruction in order to do this. So I do believe our counselors may or may not have that time available, if that makes sense, to be able to do that kind of intensive work.
Steve?
I don't think this is a question I can get an answer to right now, but if this is needed in all of the schools, and there are schools that haven't been able to have this program because of funding, how short are we on funding? What do we need to fully fund this program?
So, I think one of the things that we've discussed with the board is one of our legislative priorities for this year is kind of social emotional funding. And to that piece, a conversation that we've had at the cabinet level has been, what does that look like? And we are currently working on getting numbers on different models. One of those models would be that if we were to expand the PBI, PBT program through our school, what would that look like and what the cost would be? So looking at really expanding that model. So we don't have that number right now, but that is something that we're working on and plan to share with the board.
Any further questions? With that, Jen, Kim, and Patty, we appreciate you guys coming in and sharing greatly. So thank you for your hard work. Next up, we have staff reports. Laura?
Good evening. I brought with me tonight David Marquardt, who's on the executive board as an elementary rep. I'm not going to let him talk right now because he's going to be part of the safety committee. So, okay. I brought with me also a couple people from Kennedy. And here's what they asked me to share. Their brag is that Kennedy School wrote a grant and received this empathy grant for $10,000. Each grade level receives $1,600 math moment. That's $400 per classroom to spend on giving to an organization. So this research and award project will go on from January to May, and they promise to update us when the classrooms have decided, talk us through that process. I also have early childhood special education people, and they would like to mention the program. Well, you'll hear more about it tonight, certainly, but early childhood special education currently has 129 students in 3 campuses, including Head Start. Students are seen for speech services in their home schools. 65 students in the process of being evaluated with referrals from community screening, infant development, and Head Start. The program started in the fall with 15 sections or 120 student slots and are adding another 1.5 sections starting January 2nd. So those are our reports for this evening.
Thank you, Laura. Robin, you've got a question?
I know the answer, but where did Kennedy get their money from for the $10,000? No, that's okay. Is it from PT, is it a national PTA grant? That's such a good question, and I can sure find out the answer. Okay, thank you.
Anything further? With that, thank you, Laura and FEA. Up next, we have the Health Insurance Committee report, and we'll call on Barry Olson.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Barry Olson. I'm the chair for the Health Committee. As requested by FEA and the Fargo School Board, you wanted a report from us on our role and what we do and a recommendation. So you have a document in front of you that has our mission statement on it. It also has the purpose of our committee, so we've generated that over the last several years. I'm not going to read those 2 things. I will read the report that we put together. Those are the last 2 paragraphs. The HIC will continue to utilize the current process in place that allows us the opportunity to consider yearly plan utilization data, health insurance funding balance, data trends, insurance proposals, consult input to make an informed recommendation to the Fargo Public Schools Board of Education on an annual basis. This existing process collectively gathers the input of employee groups and provides the best insurance plan options for our staff. The committee recommends that we continue to provide recommendations regarding funding levels for HSA FSSA contributions, premium levels, employee, employer cost shares, and design plans annually to the Fargo Public Schools Board of Education. Do you have any questions from our report that we put together for you?
Jim, go ahead.
I don't have any questions, but I do, having had the opportunity to serve on the Health Insurance Committee many years ago, want to extend my personal thanks to each and every one of you that serve on it. Especially the first year you're on it. There's a little bit of a learning curve, or maybe the first 5 years. So thank you, and please pass along my gratitude to the rest of the team.
I will do that.
Anything further? Thank you, Barry, for your
You're welcome.
input. We appreciate that. Next up, we have the Safety Committee report, and I'll call on Mr. Gandhi.
Sure, so this is going to be a group presentation, and I think I have the last couple of slides, so I will ask Laura, David Marquardt, and Rebecca Folden to go ahead and kick off the presentation, as they were also members of our Safety Committee.
Okay. Oh, I've got the first few slides right here, and these are just sort of generally setting up what was our process, how did we get going. I won't read the slides to you, but you can see, even if you can't make out those words, we have a lot of people on the committee covering many different types of work with our students. We have classroom teachers, special education teachers, administrators, our wellness coordinator. We definitely have coverage from many different job types. We met 4 times. I laughed because Rupak put on here 2 hours each. He would stand there at 6 o'clock, like flash the lights, have his jammies on. I mean, we never, I'm just kidding, he didn't really. People stayed late, continued the conversations, kept working. I mean, clearly it was really important work we felt like we were doing, and we really had some good synergy. So the 4 to 6, that was the official time. Conversations continued, and then out in the parking lot too, when it wasn't too cold. The norms, the plan was to have consensus of the committee members. I don't think we ever got down to counting votes. We came up very comfortably with agreement. You know, we had good discussion getting to that point. We used a few groovy techno tools to look at how we could rate and prioritize the Nearpod, and there was a homegrown version that Stephen DeRoe made for us, right? So we were able to see our conversation, our decisions going on as well. And is that 5? Do you pick up now, David? No. So we had this charge, right? We needed to define, you know, what is safety? What do we expect to see? What do we need to see? Certainly some challenges and possible solutions. And come up with some recommendations for the school board. So that's where we're going to end up today. Now I think it's you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Like Laura had mentioned, we had the 4 meetings. It was a clear ideas of what we'll be doing at each of our meetings. And so our first day was discussion of safety and what does it mean to us. And it was just kind of go around the circle and explain what do you think safety is and what we need to do. And that was kind of the discussion for the first day. The next meeting was the small group brainstorming solutions. We really broke into small groups, some interest. If you're in this area, if you're interested in this area, go into this group kind of thing. Otherwise, we just put people in certain groups. It was a great time to discuss in small groups, and then we broke apart and did some large group discussion after that. The third day that we met was the pros and cons for each area of study, and then how they prioritize them. And then we kind of had like 5 stickers, and we had to say, was this the best area? Where do you think would be the best way to use funds possibly, or just the ideas of the areas of what we were thinking. So that was nice to see. And then like Laura mentioned, also the technology, the visual part in those meetings was very beneficial to see what people were thinking as we were going along throughout these meetings. And our last day was recommendations for the board, which you'll see eventually coming up here. So during these discussions, these are some of the questions that we were asked and we had to answer. What areas of safety do we need to address to improve the learning environment of all students in FPS? Another question was, what areas of safety are concerning? What do we already have in place in Fargo Public Schools to address our experiences? And then through all these questions, it's kind of hard to read, but we could answer electronically where we thought, and all of our answers went up on the board, and we could see people's ideas were, what they thought were thinking. So it was a great discussion throughout. Great technology used throughout the whole thing for us to see visually and get people's ideas and get communication and talking going. So it was a great tool to use, and we had really good discussions throughout these 4 meetings.
So from there, first of all, I'm Rebecca Fulden. For those that don't know me, I am the principal at Claire Barton Hawthorne. From this, all of these ideas were generated, and really, we found that they fit into 4 kind of groups. So all of those ideas came into compensation or staffing, training, wraparound services and outside agencies, or communication and data reporting. So those sticky notes all became one of those 4 areas. This was a really neat project that we worked on. We worked in groups, and we really took, from there, all of those items turned into 14 topics. So if you see on here, we have 1 through 14 on the side. What we did is we looked through all of these areas and we talked about cost versus benefit. We wanted to see which we felt had the most benefit, which ones might cost us more in certain areas, which ones would have a higher benefit for less cost. So that was the result of our teamwork. We split into groups to do this, and again, there were 14 different areas that we looked at. The next thing that we did, and this was individually, we did a forced choice matrix, and what this was, we took each of the 14 areas and we ranked them how individually we felt they were ranked from each other. So for example, this one is define consistent behavior standards for pre-K-12. So we would take that and we would determine, is A, being the define consistent behavior, is that higher ranking than benchmarks at elementary, middle, and high school? Is that higher ranking than assessments and behavior? So we went through each one and ranked them against each other. And it was quite interesting, and it was really hard to do, but it was really, the result was interesting. So this is the result. Of those 14 areas, you can see the count on the right-hand side. And I would have to say the top 3 areas that come out here, which are para-training, wraparound services, and those are community services, and really self-care for our Fargo Public Schools employees. Those 3 areas were number 1, 2, and 3 on every single thing that we did, from the first time we met to the end. So those 3 areas were high priority for us along the way. That isn't to say the others aren't important, but those top 3 were our top 3 across the board. And I'll give you a minute just to look through those 14, because we went anything from assessments to early intervention for pre-K to paras in the classroom for K2. I mean, we really tried to think about all the different angles that we could. And again, like I said, those top 3 were standouts. So when we ranked each again, coming from those top 3, we ranked the priority against each other, and again, those top 3, para-training, wraparound service, and self-care came out as the highest areas. And you can see the percentages on the side where those 14 items fell as priority. And then the final thing, our further discussion that we had is, once we saw the 14 areas, we really talked about what do we want to bring to the board. We decided to eliminate J, and I'm going to go back here, J was increased incentives for sped teachers, and we really just felt like at this time that wasn't a part of a safety committee topic, that might be something else. And there was lots of other implications with that. So our team unanimously decided that J needed to be pulled from the list of recommendations. And then from there, we also talked about how A through D on that sheet, they kind of fit in the same area. So when we go back and you see like A is defined consistent behavior standards, B is benchmarks, they kind of all fit in the same data area. So we put those 4 together in one category. So when all was said and done, we have 10 recommendations to move forward with. And I will turn it to Rupak.
So what you have in front of you and on your slides are the final recommendations coming out of the safety committee for the school board to consider. So I think the essential question that comes to play now is, what's next? And we, before I go into what's next, I really just kind of want to talk through the process as well. So we, after the safety committee, gave out a survey to make sure that everyone was either in agreement with the process that we followed for the safety committee, there was equity in voice, and that everyone felt that they had the opportunity to participate in a meaningful way. Majority of the responses, actually all the responses we got on those standards that you see here, which is I feel the safety committee's charge was clearly defined, it accomplished the goals that were given, fell under strongly or agree. But we also gave individuals the opportunity to provide personal feedback on the safety committee in terms of just the process and what would you like to see next. So the only areas that you will see that I would say that are areas that we could continue to work on is comments like, I hope the work of that time we put in the committee doesn't get put on the back burner. I wish that we could start working on the implementation of the recommendations that we had. We're going back to the original charge of the safety committee. Well, we knew our charge was to come up with a list of recommendations, but when you get so deep into the work and you're researching it, you want to now start working on the implementation as well. And that's kind of going to lead to our next steps as well. So our next steps is we have decided that the safety committee will meet again going into the second semester of this year. We will meet with all the original group that was in the safety committee and now start to work on implementing these recommendations. We know that some of these recommendations are recommendations that are not cost heavy and that we can implement right off the bat, and then kind of bring those to the board and say, these are the recommendations that we've already done. However, if there's conversations that do have a significant cost and that we do need to bring to the board, we would like the ability to vet those with our staff and say, this is what those recommendations implemented would look like, and this would be the commitment, or this is what the recommendation to the board would be. So our next steps are going to be to continue the work of the safety committee. Next semester, reconvene at least one more time with the original group, lay out a plan on talking about how we can implement some of these recommendations, specifically some of the things that we can knock off during the course of this year, talk about what we want to roll out by the start of next year, and then our long-term plan as well, and then start mapping that out. And then we'll address our short and long-term priorities. So with that being said, I think all 4 of us are open to any questions board members may have.
Robin?
I have 2 questions on the top 2 recommendations. The first one is the wraparound / community schools. Are those community-based or third-party external providers that the safety committee is considering, and does that affect AP 35? Does that affect AP 3510?
It would be something that we would need to look at. It's definitely something that we talked about that we would like to look at third-party outside, but that would be something we'd have to look at policy for and look at costs that would be, impacting that piece. But if we are not able to provide those services within the school, and there's an outside agency that is able to, we don't want to duplicate services, but how we could add those.
Okay. And then my second question is about self-care. Is that the curriculum that's based on building compassionate schools?
This is really staff self-care.
Right.
And I'm going to kind of share a little bit about what I'm doing at my school. I just knew this year I wanted to make staff worry about staff. They need to be healthy for them. So I worked with HR and the DO to provide services through the village so that they come in, and part of our PLCs is mental health, self-care, compassion fatigue, dealing with stress. And we've done a really great job of offering that outside of school hours. But when it's 6 o'clock at night and you're stressed out, and that's the last thing you want to attend. So I just think we need to do a better job of using those services within the school day to meet the needs of our staff so that they are addressing what they need to and they're being heard and they have that opportunity to share with an outside agency some of those frustrations. So part of that could be looking at, we have a contract with the village. Every employee gets so many services. Do we relook at that and have some more in-house services for our staff and those kinds of pieces?
Further questions? With that, oh, Brandy's got one.
Thank you, guys. This looks awesome, and thanks for on this.
And I'd like to thank all four of you and all the entire committee. I know it was a lot of hours and conversations, and we really appreciate the time and effort that's been put into this, and I look forward to having implementation. Next, we'll have the Early Childhood Task Force report, and we will call on Missy.
Okay, we have the Early Childhood Task Force that's just completed, and we're gonna go through the process that we used. And Jim has done a great job kind of updating us how this has gone, but I'll just kind of put it all together. So I was able to facilitate this with Rupak, Dr. Gross, Patty Cummings, and Rebecca Campbell. And so we'd get together to help kind of plan each of the sessions and facilitate as we went forward. We had 4 meetings. We had originally scheduled 5. We were fortunate that we were able to get through all the work that needed to be done in 4 meetings. But we had 33 members on the Early Childhood Task Force meeting. And I will just say that the representation was amazing. So we had everything of community providers from Boys and Girls Club, Head Start, YMCA, NDSU, and I might need a little help with the name, but Jane, who used to run the Early Childhood Task Force, retired. Yeah, and so it was just, and parents who have had students in the program. So it was a very nice mix of people that had a common goal of really wanting to see what's next for early childhood as we went forward. One of the pieces that is important anytime that we have a task force type meeting is making sure we define what consensus is for moving forward, because we probably don't come to 100% agreement on everything, but we felt comfortable if the majority with an 80% vote going forward allowed us to bring recommendations to the board as we went forward. The charge that we had, this is the slide we actually used with the team, is that early childhood students and early childhood special education students within Fargo Public Schools. And the reason I want to talk about this first charge is that it actually got a little muddy for us in the task force, and I wanted to share that. So when you think of early childhood, we think of all students in Fargo, and we would love them all to have access to early childhood services as we go forward. We know that the preschool can have such an effect on lifetime learning. One of the things that we kind of came to recognize as we move forward through this is that we have some other pieces at the legislative level that are not funding preschool. So the charge to make sure that it's within what we can control. And our charge as a district is to serve our early childhood special education. At the same time, while I say muddy, is that we realize there are some best practices that require high levels of early childhood special education, require typically aged peers. And so how do we do that as a community and work together? And that's why we needed a lot of brains around this as we talk. And so we need to talk about the type of service, what are those research-based qualities that we want, where and how would these services be delivered, and how do we bring that together in, I guess, our task force charge or the work order of what we're going to do next. And so we looked at this, we followed a similar format to the safety committee, overview of current programming, small group brainstorming, pros and cons, and recommendations for the board. The first meeting, we kind of had to go through for everyone because everybody had different expertise to look at the big picture. And the first thing that we wanted to make sure is that we all understood that in Fargo right now, we serve early childhood students who are special education. And then we have Even Start, which is funded through the United Way, which is serving our English language learner students on the same site. They have the same schedule. They may partner on some special projects, but they really are two separate programs. Currently, we have an MOU of understanding with Head Start. So if a student who is in Head Start would qualify for early childhood special education services, we would have one of our teachers go into that program and provide those services. We have community preschools, and we also have child care centers and family child care. And so just understand all the different pieces that we have around early childhood type activities in Fargo-Moorhead. The second thing we looked at the meeting is just to make sure people understood how we serve currently. I call it a rolling enrollment because as children turn 3, they can qualify for services. So one thing that's different than the regular school year is we are adding children all year long every month after screening when they hit certain age markers to be in classes. So we have Madison has 2 classrooms. They're half-day programming, 3 hours each. Agassiz has 4. We have the South Campus, which is at Centennial. And then Head Start has 3 campuses, and one of Head Start's campus is at Madison. And so they have space from us. Just to take a look at this now, I'll probably have to check out the numbers because on the update we had, they said that we're serving 129. So when we started the task force, we had 119 of the slots filled. But that is something that is challenging with ECSE, is that we always have students that need to be served coming on board as we go through the year. Okay. What happened in that second meeting is after we understood how we serve students in Fargo, we started brainstorming about what are the critical attributes and components needed for high quality childhood special education programming. And that was actually a really engaging activity where we let people have time on their own to brainstorm on Post-its things that they valued. We also then allowed them to talk in groups and teams, take what we call a dump, lump, and clump activity. It means that you're going to take all those individual ideas and now look at which ones can sort together. What are we similar about? And from each of those tables, they were able to write a theme from that collection of ideas. What happened as we went forward then, after that, was in meeting 3, we took and typed up everything that, those themes that we came up with, and let the group first said we change any wording and kind of wordsmith. And we went to the forced choice matrix again, which you just saw for the safety committee. Again, helping us kind of sort out what do we prioritize in this list. That is the sheet. There should be a separate sheet at your table with red and blue on. So I wanted to make sure that you saw all those choices in front of you and a graph. So after the forced choice matrix was completed, then we came back in the 4th meeting and people were able to see the graph that you're seeing at the top. And I guess I could go back because I realize people can't see it otherwise. And again, it's the same choices there that are going to compare against one another to get the priority. Track. So with that, I'll go back to the 4th. So now we have the priorities and we want to take a look at, to review what was consensus on there. So we took the first graph and we said, let's just discuss at our tables before we go any further. What do you see as a large group? What questions do you have? Before that, we would try to come to consensus with the recommendation for the board going forward. Ask questions, clarify. Then we brought back to the group and we said there seems to be a natural break in the data, similar to kind of what we saw on the safety committee also. And we saw that those top 4 seemed to have, were set apart from the rest. When we talked through the recommendations, we asked the group, and I'll go to the next question, for consensus, if they were going to vote on that, if the ones we have in red would be primary recommendations and then secondary recommendations going forward. When we took our first vote as going with the group, it was 82%. So we were very fortunate that we had consensus, but we discussed what were some things that were maybe stopping us from having 100%. When we looked at that, we talked about that the wording on G at the time had all children. And when we talked about that as a large group, we don't have control of all children yet or the funding mechanism. So we did change that to children in early childhood education for that one as a group. We had 2 people who said they disagreed with screening not being part of the primary ones. And so I think that we all value screening and realize how powerful that'd be, but we do not have right now a law in North Dakota that says that all children have to be screened. And so those are some things that we do think make them suitable to be recommendations for further study as we go forward. So we think all the recommendations are very solid for early childhood. Some do need us to work through them, maybe even helps us think of lobbying for some things that we need to support early childhood going forward. But we did take a vote again and we ended up at 82% again. So we did make sure that we went through that process twice. So we felt confident bringing forward tonight the red as the primary recommendations and the blue as for further study as we go forward with early childhood. But we still had one more question that we needed to answer. And we asked, where should early childhood be occurring in the Fargo district so that we can give information to the next task force that'll happen second semester. And we gave everybody 3 Post-it notes and we said, do you think it should be at one site, multiple sites in the city, or at every elementary? And you can spend your 3 Post-it notes wherever you want. If you feel strongly about multiple sites, put them all there. If you want one on each, go ahead. And so we wanted to see kind of the will of the group again. And it was interesting that 58 of those Post-its ended up on multiple sites for, seemed like access was something that was coming up. That 30 ended up on having one big, preschool site for the whole city, and only 3 were on every elementary. And I will say, this is something we'll always be torn on a little bit, because anytime you can put it on one site, you can maximize effectiveness of using staff at one site. Multiple sites, we're always gonna have that challenge, but then we also have a benefit to families to be able to access the site. So it's just, we always have different things to weigh out. But I wanted to make sure that you saw that we did address the where with the group also. And I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Missy.
Of course I have questions. Okay.
And Robin.
Okay, so we are not only morally obligated, but federally obligated to teach special education students from age 3 to 21. Is that a fair statement?
Yep.
Okay, is that through IDEA? Okay, so with that obligation, I think that needs to be stated. This is not an option for us not to, it shouldn't be an option not to educate them. So when it comes to busing, are we also required to provide busing to these students no matter where they are?
Yes, if
Okay.
they qualify for early childhood special education.
Okay. Sorry, I do the answers, but I think it's important for our board to know that, because some of these mandates come down unfunded, and so we need to lobby for some of those. And these are for identifiable students, because we all know how hard it is for kindergarten roundup. So how could we work with that at the state legislative level? Is that what you're thinking?
I do think that we're gonna have to look at the legislative level, how do we increase screening?
Right.
The more kids that we can reach before kindergarten, the better kindergarten year students are gonna have.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Okay, none. Thank you very much, Missy, and all the members of that committee. Next up, we have a report, superintendent's report from Mr. Gandhi.
I just have one thing, and that is just to kind of inform the board of a new playground that will be happening at Washington Elementary. We, through the city of Fargo, we were allocated some funds to renovate that playground, which was kind of next on our list for playgrounds that we needed to work at as well. So we've been really fortunate. The process that happens with the city of Fargo is that there's a public notice for public comment that's put out. So that was put out in the forum, I believe, last Friday. So it should be ending soon, but we're grateful for that opportunity. We had reached out to the city to inquire about the process, and then they said, here are the funds. So that worked out nicely for us.
Thank you very much. That ends our staff reports. Up next is the consent agenda.
I move adoption of the consent agenda with the HR addendum.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed? All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Business items. Item A is our audit report. I would like to call on Jackie.
So you have in front of you a copy of our audit report where we have received an unqualified opinion, which is what we want. And just to note, there is also a inserted page toward the back that is very important, that if you would share the audit report, that you use that page, not the printed page. There was a mistake in the printing where they checked a box that is not a good box to have checked. So just so you're aware of that, we ended the year with our ending general fund balance that's unassigned, just under 20%. So we're doing very well financially and look forward to continuing that. So if you have any questions, I would be happy to try to answer them.
Jim?
I don't have any questions, but I'm going to move that we accept and file the audit report for fiscal year June 30th, 2018, and forward copies to all the appropriate agencies as requested.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Anne Marie, would you call the roll, please? Oh, any discussion? Hearing none. Anne Marie?
Ani,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Robin Nelson,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Ulrich,
Yes.
oh, sorry, Knutson,
Yes.
Motion carries. Item B is office entrance remodels. That goes with memo 59. Rupak, do you want to take that?
Yep, and I am actually going to ask Jim Free to kind of come up and take that piece, and he'll get us kicked off.
Thank you for having me tonight. I wanted to bring forward a office entrance remodel project that we had been planning for a while. As you aware of, some of the schools are, we always try to go through office, enter in through office and get into the school to keep the public checked in so we know where everybody is and who's coming in the building. And we have 5 schools that don't really have that yet. Longfellow, Clara Barton, and Lincoln Elementary, and also Horace Mann and Roosevelt. Horace Mann and Roosevelt, you may be familiar with, but that office is in the middle of the school on the second floor. It's really problematic as to how to get people up to those offices. I think those offices are a little bit different than the rest of the 3 here that we have identified as maybe a little bit easier to do. So anyway, what we are bringing forward for you is potential costs of doing some work at Longfellow Elementary. Before I start going through some of these, just let you know that we did work with the principals, and we used Zerberg Architects to help us with this. And we tried to figure out different ways where the school, where the best entrance could be. For example, Longfellow, We all know that the gym entrance seems like it's the main entrance to the school, but it's not. The main entrance is on the south side. So after we went through the study and went through the work of looking at that, we decided that maybe we should just abandon the south entrance idea and really try to build it right and have the entrance where the parking lot is so we can see people coming in, people park there, it's easy to get to the office. So in these schools, that's sort of what we did. With the exception of Lincoln. Lincoln, we still kept it on the west side of the building and added on a small portion of that. Anyway, you'll see the costs associated with those entrances, remodeling. The only expense that's probably not on here is if we do decide to move forward with this is if we want to use a construction manager or not for a fee. But we're far from that yet, I believe. But anyway, this is what the proposed costs would be. Any questions on the floor plans that were developed? Again, this is a 10,000-foot view. This is what we could do. You know, these are far from drawings that would be bid on, but in working with the principals, this is what we felt could work and tried to maximize use of the buildings. And of course, when you vacate an office for a different area, then you need to remodel the area you just moved from because now it's unusable as if you want to make it a special education room or a classroom or a music room or whatever function you want to put in there. So, but with that, I'd entertain any questions that people have.
Randy, go ahead.
So you have on here for Clara Barton, the 13 additional parking stalls, but then you also have on the bottom the 18. So you're saying it's going to be an extra 100,000 for the extra parking is that what that means basically, is the
Yeah.
optional?
There is an option to move the playground to provide more parking, but that would take, that's mostly the playground relocation project. The parking stalls, if we decide to move the playground, we'd be able to have 5 more parking stalls with that, so that would be part of that whole project, or that line item, if you will.
Thank you.
Yes, Rupak.
And even to that point, just to kind of, I think Jim touched on this as well, is that we worked with Zerberg just to get kind of initial costs on what these projects would look like. So we have something to bring to the board and bring to planning if, based on whatever the board decides, and if we were told to kind of move further, we definitely would have the opportunity to dive deeper into the actual plans of the buildings and also have the architects meet with the board to talk through every specific aspect as well. We just don't want to proceed with that work because that is at a cost without really knowing that direction as well. So just kind of want to reiterate that this is kind of the initial plans with a good estimate of the cost as well, but there definitely will have that opportunity to get into details and look at specific aspects of the projects.
And we did use grant dollars when President Obama had like a Homeland Security grant when he first took office. There was a lot of money that was injected into shovel-ready projects throughout the nation. There was quite a bit of dollars that was offered through North Dakota, through, I don't remember, Homeland Security, I believe. But we did do a lot of the upgrades in this other schools. You know, Kennedy, Bennett, we put the doors in and go through the office, and all of the A-phones that we used for buzzing people in and the visual thing with that, so.
Robin?
So you're talking about our dollars from the previous grants. So this is maybe more of a funding question. The RO dollars are no longer available,
That's
correct?
correct.
So are there were safety grants through the state that were available are those done too?
At this time, there are no grants available for us for these specific type of projects. We'll continue to look at them, if they come up. We would be looking to fund these either out of the general fund or building fund, most likely out of both, if we proceeded.
But a possible legislative issue that we could
Possibly.
broach, okay.
Jim?
Yeah, I'd like to move that we authorize administration to proceed with the bid process to secure architectural services for office and entrance remodels at Longfellow, Lincoln, and Clara Barton Elementaries.
I'll second.
Is there any further discussion? Jennifer?
Can I ask a question, Jim, about the
estimated timeline and how this would fit into the upcoming long-range facilities discussion task force?
You know, I think we could probably do like the Lincoln project's about, 600 and 700,000. I think we can maybe get that ready, done by next fall, or very close. But just with the experience I've had getting building materials, and if you approve this, we have to put an ad in the paper for 21 days for architectural services, and then we have to spend a week or two interviewing, and then after that, we unleash the architects to start drawing, and then we have another 21 days to bid that. I'm afraid if we get into March, April again, and bid, we may not be able to finish all of those projects. However, if we do proceed with Longfellow, we certainly could spend a lot of time building the new portion, and we don't have to move in there right away. It could be a part of a two-phase approach that we could get the new construction done, then vacate the area, and then move in either during the school year, if that's possible, or maybe even the summer after.
Rupak.
And to answer the question on kind of the impact on the long-range facilities plan, regardless of the timeline for the work, once we go to bid and we have an architect we're working for and we finalize plans, we'll know the square footage of the building and where we want. Fortunately, most of these programs, most of these projects are focused on the entryway remodel, so they shouldn't change the building capacity and usage. That would drive the long-range facilities plan too much.
Jennifer.
And then just one follow-up on grants, because I had asked Jackie the same question. Thank you for the follow-up information. But in there were some pending opportunities maybe in 2019, but the motion today doesn't have to do with where the funding is going to come from. So we could ultimately, if those become available, find the monies that way.
Correct. I would, and Jim can say yea or nay to this, I don't know that I would anticipate us doing all three of these at the same time. Just my take on it. So maybe one and start the other.
Sure.
So over the next couple of years, kind of work through these.
And I think two probably could work. All three would be a big job, especially with Discovery moving and getting completed.
Yes, Brian.
So we're looking at building fund, general fund right now, and it's probability that we could do that with.
Yes, we would have the capacity to do it in either or. I would have some suggestions as we move forward once we would get some finalized costs on how we would fund them.
Jennifer.
Well, and just to add on to that, Brian, that was part of the reason for my question about how does this feed into the next task force? Because there too is going to be a funding conversation based on what the recommendations are from that task force, where that money, if there's money going to be needed, where that's going to come from. So I was curious how this all sort of fits together.
As I understand, it's not we're just gonna go out to bid, get an architect type thing, draw it up, and so we're not committed yet to doing these projects. But we need to move forward with the planning and stuff so.
You would be committed to the architectural fees part.
Correct.
But the actual bidding, you're right. Yeah.
Further questions? Hearing none, we'll call the roll. Anne Marie?
Benson.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Brian Nelson.
Yes.
Robin Nelson.
Yes.
Paulson.
Yes.
Knutson.
Yes.
Ani.
Yes.
Ulrich.
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you.
Christie.
Yes, David.
Just before you leave, Jim, first of all, I'm glad to see you back at 100%.
Thank you.
This stemmed from my liaison visit down at Kennedy. The principal pointed out to me that the kindergarten has a separate playground area.
Yes.
And it's right up against the street, and it has not been fenced. Is that already in the plan, and it just hasn't been done because of the season and whatever? It seems like a very immediate safety concern to me.
It's If we do one, there'll be 15 of them that we'll have to do. So that would be a concern I'd have as far as the funding. I understand there is quite a space away from the road. We have probably other schools that are even much closer. I'm thinking Horace Mann maybe so much, but I think it would be something we could certainly visit and make a determination if we want to do that. But I think it would be probably others that we would probably do then. And that might be appropriate to do too. I'm not saying that we shouldn't look at it, you know.
Okay, Rupak? Nothing? Okay, thank you very much, Jim, for
Okay.
that, and thanks for the work that you've done so far.
Yeah, and thank you all for reaching out. I think most of you reached out when I was sick, and appreciate the comments, and thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you. That concludes our business. Now we will move on to our board reports. You have memo 53, and it's our school liaison visit discussion. And have you had a chance to review and go through those? Okay, we won't continue further on that, but please, if you haven't had a chance, please read through those. Next up, we have task force updates. And do we have an update, Robin, from you?
The next meeting for the LRE task force is December 17th. That was an additional meeting that was added on. So same time, same place, 3:30 at the Boy Scouts building, Wanzik.
Okay, thank you. We've got the reports on 2 other task force tonight, and the last task force, which is the building capacity and usage, will start in the 2nd semester. So that should take care of it. Up next, committee liaison and correspondence reports. David, let's start with you.
I'm sorry, I have no report for tonight.
Okay, thank you. Jennifer?
I just want to say thank you to all. I enjoyed reading the 30-page document of all our liaison visits. I always gain some information from each one, so thank you.
Robin?
Sure. Attended the governance meeting on November, yes, it's December now, November 29th. As far as Governmental Affairs Committee, a few of us visited the legislative issue for the legislative breakfast for the chamber this morning, which was very appropriate for our GAC committee and school board members to attend. We also met today at noon. We are seeking, now that we have legislators seated, we are seeking your preference as far as who you would like to, I don't know what the term is, paired with or assigned to or liaison. If there are certain legislators that you are comfortable working with, please email those to me. If there are certain legislators that you are not comfortable working with, please include that as well. And then we'll kind of work to try to assign everybody. It's certainly not a forced thing. If you're not comfortable visiting with them, we're not going to make you do it. So after those are kind of divvied out and assigned, the plan coming out of today's GAC meeting was we're going to send out a blanket email to our local legislators, and with that, an electronic version of our legislative priorities and also how they can reach each one of us. So more soon on that, but please send me your preferences, and we'll work on it as a committee to get those assigned, but I don't think it should be very difficult. So thank you in advance for getting back to us on that. Other than that, our next GAC meeting is, we have a possible placeholder on January 8th, and then in February, the 2nd Tuesday, we'll be planning our legislative crossover breakfast. So we're working on that, and I feel compelled to explain my questions about what should be reported during this session. Is it appropriate to bring that up now? Yes. Okay. What I do is make a list of all of my liaison assignments in my schools that I'm assigned to, and then I report on those. And I'm guilty. I'm guilty as well of sometimes reporting some of my community events. So since I called all of us out, I'm trying to also discipline myself, and so now I keep the committees that I'm on, their means, and that is hopefully helping me stay in the boundaries that we have been given as board members. I appreciate how involved all the board members are at different community levels. And I looked at this, and it also made me analyze things like attendance at chamber events and what is appropriate for us to report on. And then this is kind of new in the culture of the board since I have been on last. It's become practice for this board to pay for chamber breakfast attendance and some committees that aren't board development related. And so many of you, I feel compelled to let you know that I don't sit with you always at FPS stuff, because when Anne Marie calls me and asks me if I want to attend, I'll say, I'm paying for that one on my own because that's not board related. And so, that was kind of a ethical thing that I was struggling with on my own. So I did reach out to the local taxing entities, City of Fargo, County and Park District, and none of those elected bodies have their chamber events or certain conventions paid for. So I'll leave it up to the culture of this board, but I want you to know that I won't let our taxpayers pay for me for personal development or social networking. So don't be offended if I don't sit with you at chamber events, but I did today because that's a legislative event, and I also thought it was appropriate for the district to pay for us when the superintendent's presented. So that is, I'll let you guys work on that with your own personal ethics, if you will.
Okay, thank you, Robin. Brian?
Nothing to report other than we had the GAC meeting today, and I'm got as I showed you guys through email, the governor's budget is out, and so there's a lot of pages to go through there, and then we'll see what happens. And so there's a lot of studying going on for my part on how all this is going to shake out, and having been through many of these legislative years, we don't really know anything until the last hour. So
Thank you. Brandy?
Well, I also attended the Governance Affairs Committee meeting this afternoon. And last Tuesday, I had a meeting for my Fargo Youth Initiative, and they had a YWCA presentation, and that was pretty neat to see. And then also, we do have a planning session on December 16th that that committee is going to be leading, and it'll be from 12:30 to 5, and we're going to be having that at the City of Fargo. So I will be attending that with them, because they're going to have all their items that they pretty much want, to continue on, and we'll just go from there, and I'll update you after that meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim?
Well, I got a couple of things. I was at the GAC committee today and the planning committee last week. The North Dakota School Boards Association called a special board meeting via telephone, thank goodness, so I didn't have to drive to Bismarck. So we could take an official position on a piece of legislation we know is going to come forward, basically authorizing school districts to arm their personnel. And we took a position to support SROs being allowed to be funded for all the school districts instead. I also received a communication from the PTA Vice President at Clara Barton Hawthorne. This is a concern going on in my neighborhood, and I've heard from several people. I don't know how many of you drive down 4th Street, but there used to be a street light there. And then as they decided to redo the infrastructure, they took all of that down. We have been informed, or at least the PTA was informed, I shouldn't say we, because I didn't have it directly, that the city does not intend to put the street light back up. Instead, I think what they're going to do is put a school crossing sign up. The neighborhood does not believe this is going to be adequate. And at a minimum, well, they would like to see us as a school board, as a school district, advocate for putting that street light back in for student safety. And just anecdotally, not that it's unique to my neighborhood, But prior to that streetlight going in, there were several serious accidents on 4th Street with students trying to cross it. It almost becomes a thoroughfare in the morning rush hour time period. So I personally, if they're not going to put a streetlight in, maybe they could leave the four-way stop they currently have there, because a four-way stop is certainly better than a on-again, off-again flashing light. So I'm hoping, perhaps, Rupak, that you can reach out to the city, let them know as a school district, that is our safe crossing street. It's the only place for anybody that lives east of 4th Street to safely get over to Hawthorne. And while that's not a huge number of kids, I'm going to guess it's 20. And if one of those 20 was my student, that's enough. So I'm hopeful they'll at least rethink this position and do something to slow the traffic down. And I think the four-way stop is better than the street light, because street lights you try to time. You know, I think I can get through this thing. A stop sign, everybody has to stop. Doesn't mean they always do, but they're supposed to. So I shared that communication with Anne Marie, so you would have it. And it came on behalf of the Clara Barton Hawthorne PTA. We have a SEEK Board of Directors meeting tomorrow, and I think that's it.
Thank you, Jim. And I was participating in the planning committee meeting last week. We also had a negotiations committee meeting, and in John's absence tonight, when I spoke with him, he did ask me to report that we had met. We've started discussions. Our next meeting will be January 3rd at noon, and then this afternoon he did get a text from Jennifer Mastrud, and January 3rd or January 14th are opportunity days that are still clear for that committee, so we could possibly meet. So we'll be sending out a poll to the committee members to see which of those 2 days works best. We handed out the president's report. 3rd or 14th. Mm-hmm. Ours is, we have one scheduled at noon, and time is flexible on the 3rd. And Jennifer just let John know that the 3rd or the 14th, I would highly doubt that the people involved would be able to attend a noon negotiations meeting other than us. So that would be probably a 3:30 or 4 like it's been done in the past. With that, the president's report has been handed out on behalf of Rebecca on the phone tonight. Something to remember is December 14th, this Friday, from 8 until 3. We do have our policy governance training with the Aspen Group. Really important and good learning opportunities for us. We do not need an executive session tonight, so we can cross off that from our agenda. And our next meeting date is January 8th. That will conclude our evening. So with that, thank you all for attending. Merry Christmas, and meeting adjourned.